in just a moment. Let me see.
Looks like we're streaming live on YouTube.
We are.
All right.
And a few people are coming in.
Excellent.
And
Yeah.
Charlie is joining us from his phone at MIT. And we are streaming live, and I think we are ready to go. It's 11 a.m.,
Okay.
folks. Good morning. I'd ask everybody to mute for a moment while we take a second to bring ourselves together at Community Church. My name is Dean. I am the music director and presently serve as administrator and candle lighter. Come on. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Candle lighter at the Community Church of Boston, where you have tuned in to bring us together in unity and strength, bring us together in solemn, sad remembrance for all those people who suffered that horrible racist attack in Buffalo. Also, to remember Palestinian-American journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, murdered by IDF just this past week. And then her funeral ceremony, again, horrifically destroyed or bothered, disturbed, beat on by more IDF soldiers. We keep them in our thoughts as we start this program. Good morning, everybody. We have such a great program this morning. Two of my just favorite spirit-filled, wonderful activist voices of social change and social conscience. My object this morning is to get out of the way as quickly as I can and just feature them. But I have a couple of announcements. First is our Wednesday event coming up. Reverend Dr. Ignacio Castuera. He is a friend of the church and a special friend of our longtime member, Dave Lewitt, who lives right around the corner. Reverend Dr. Ignacio has spoken here several times and is a professor of theology at Claremont School of Theology, and also affiliated minister with several Universalist Unitarian churches in Los Angeles. Claremont, that is California. So happens I went to school there as well, not the School of Theology, but Pomona. Anyway, Dr. Castuera will be joining us this Wednesday. It'll, I'm sure, be a very wonderful and intimate event. His topic is James and Whitehead on life after death. That would be William James and Alfred North Whitehead. He's a theology wonk, and he's talking about life after death, which to me is not a subject of great interest. To me, heaven is right here, right now, and it's amazing and it's wow, and it's our task to make it that for all beings. But he's going to talk about life after death. I really like Reverend Castuera, and I think you will too. Whoever is unmuted, please mute. Thank you. That's this Wednesday. Our who is unmuted? Please mute thyself. I got him. I found the culprit. So join us on Wednesday at 7. Dr. Ignacio Castuera, Mexican-American, really a wonderful voice to hear from. He just happens to be in town, and join us to hear him. We have some other great programs coming up next Sunday. Is Madeline Holmes. She wrote a book about Hiroshima, sister cities, just relationships between cities in the United States and other countries with Hiroshima. And we're just planning our Nagasaki Day for August as well, the day they bombed Nagasaki. So this will be a really interesting program. After that is Matthew Ho on Memorial Day. He's a disabled veteran, and his program is called "Is There a Purpose for Memorial Day?" There's many other programs coming up all the way through June, as well as our annual meeting, which happens on June 12th. We elect new officers, and we take stock of what the year was like. That's June 12th, 1 p.m. after a musical program that day. That's Leonard Lerman and his wife Helene Spearman, who have written operas about our martyr patron saints, Sacco and Vanzetti. They also wrote an opera about the Rosenbergs, executed in the early 50s for things unbecoming of the American empire. So lots of things coming up. Keep in touch with Community Church of Boston. Come see our mountain of books that we have inherited from the estate of Robert Datilio, and also get a tour of our new Sacco and Vanzetti research room that's up on the 3rd floor. And it's being tended to by 3 days a week by Jerry Kaplan, our newfound treasure of a researcher on anarchism and on Sacco and Vanzetti. And of course, Bob Datilio was probably the world's foremost scholar on the Sacco and Vanzetti case. I think that I am done. No, I'm not. I attended an event this past Friday. It was a standout in front of the office of Representative Zionist Jake Auchincloss. And we had about 50 people there, and it was a terrific event, and we handed a petition to one of his staff people. There will be a similar event in front of the offices of Zionist Representative Stephen Lynch. It's on May 22nd, and if you would like some information on that, you can go to Jewish Voice for Peace Boston's Facebook page or website, and they will give you all the details as to the time and the address. We need to raise our voices against Zionist racism and apartheid. Andy Davis, Eroc Arroyo. We are so happy to welcome you here. And I don't even know who's going to go first. I just know that the ball is in their court to inspire us and delight us and make us angry and make us whatever they want to have us feel. Eroc, I'm so happy to have you here. I want to hear about your kids. I love seeing your Facebook posts about your beautiful children. Eroc is a dad. That's how I want to introduce him right now. But you all know that he's been here many times, and he's inspired us with all kinds of other phases of his activist, beautiful life, and his family's life as well. Andy Davis took the place of this guy. That guy's name is Willard Uphouse. Here's a beautiful photograph of Willard Uphouse. Willard received our Sacco and Vanzetti Award in 1980. He was the director of the World Fellowship Center, and his wife, whose name escapes me now, and for many years, and he was jailed. And maybe Andy can tell us more about that, for not handing over the membership list of World Fellowship Center to the authorities of the state of New Hampshire. And he received our Sacco and Vanzetti Prize. He was a longtime friend of our minister of 40 years named Donald Lothrop. They have a huge correspondence that I want to share with Andy someday up in our archives. That's how I want to introduce the both of these two. And whoever goes first, I will spotlight. Thank you for being with us. And thank you everybody for joining us for Eroc and Andy and Eroc.
Thank you so much, Dean. That would be me going first. We are so glad to be here with you. We're honored that Dean asked us to appear again. And Eroc and I were excited to do something together. And we're mostly interested in telling you some stories and doing some rhymes. But we thought there ought to be some sort of an organizing principle. So about 3 weeks ago, I was on a walk with my dog, Darby, the Beagle. I do some of my best thinking with Darby, the Beagle, and I bounce my thoughts off her. She's always my first audience. But I got on this ancient communication device to talk to Eroc. I was in my home in the White Mountains in New Hampshire, and he was at his home in Boston, and we had just a glorious hour together chewing over possibilities of how we would organize things. And I told him that one of the things that I had been thinking of recently was about how the stories that we tell change over time, how they change us, we change them, and their meaning changes. And there were a couple of stories in particular I was thinking that I've told for a long time that stood out for me. So relying on Eroc's wordsmithing skills, we started working on a title, and Eroc is not just a wordsmith, but especially an alliteratist. So he just naturally went for something alliterative. So that's how we came up with recollection, revision, and reframing. So our idea is that I'll continue with these somewhat rambly organizing thoughts. Then I will tell a quick story. Eroc will do a piece. I will do another story. Eroc will maybe share a couple rhymes, and then we'll open it up for community reflection and discussion. So I guess I should begin by stating the obvious. And maybe this is only obvious, especially to storytellers. We like to say that people figure out how to ascribe meaning to life by telling stories to each other, and especially stories about what we've experienced. And one thing that I've noticed over time is that people can draw different lessons from the same experience, or even they can have different experiences in the same experience. For example, a few years ago, I was working on a story to perform about something that happened to me when I was working for Witness for Peace in Guatemala. And I had a very clear idea about what had happened and where it happened. And the incident in question happened, without doubt to my mind, in a Mennonite guest house in Guatemala City. But in doing my research for the story, I grilled my co-team members, Dan and Laura, about what they remembered of the incident. And Laura remembered very clearly that the incident in question happened on a bus between Guatemala City and Lake Atitlan. And the truth is, I liked her version better, so that's how I tell it now. But there's a Barbara Kingsolver quote that I love that seems relevant here. Memory is a relative of truth, but not its twin. And let me say that again. Memory is a relative of truth, but not its twin. As a storyteller, I fish in 3 streams: the aforementioned stream of personal memory, the stream of history, and the stream of folklore. And I think whatever stories we're dealing with, we should be wary, and how accustomed we get to telling a particular story, we should be wary of letting a particular version become settled law. I mentioned walking with Darby the Beagle, and I often think how different our experiences of the world are. And I just don't mean primarily in that I don't take information in primarily through my feeble sense of smell. And I don't greet others of my kind by smelling their butts. But she lives in the eternal now, while I have the opportunity to live in the past, present, and future all at once. But even Darby the Beagle hopefully remembers the fateful encounter she had one day with a porcupine, and hopefully that affects how she lives her life in the future among the wild beasts of our current neighborhood. So as someone who only knows for sure that we have this one wild and precious life, I know I have to learn as I go, and I keep learning from the experiences I have this time around, not being able to count on building on the experiences of future lifetimes. There's no reincarnation in our title. And this may be implicit and obvious, but what I'm saying about individuals goes for countries too, of course. It's healthy once in a while to revisit our foundational myths and any other central identity stories that have developed along the way, and relearn the lessons or change the lessons as we go. So I'd like to tell you a story that's been with me now for 40 years, and it's changed drastically in the way I think of it. So back in the days when I probably should have been in college and sometimes was, my friends and I would make an annual migration with so many other young people to the coast to work in beach towns for the summer. Our choice was the charming hamlet of Ogunquit, Maine, perched on 3 miles of unbroken white sand on the edge of the sparkling Atlantic. Ogunquit, then as now, was a haven for all kinds of sea and sun worshiping humanity. Families, French Canadian families, a thriving, long-established gay community, and us, the young people with raging libidos who formed the backbone of the summer workforce. Our ringleader was Norm, who was charismatic and slightly abusive of his power. He was the only one who got to have a first name. The rest of us were Davis, Walker, Alvarez. You get the idea. Oh, the women got to have first names too, but the only one you need to know about is Bobby. Bobby was waitressing at Einstein's restaurant in the center of town and going out with Norm, who treated her like a queen some of the time. The truth is that all of us guys were kind of a little bit in love with Bobby because she was sweet and kind and had some optimistic faith that all these young sunburned heirs to the patriarchy with whom she hung out could somehow evolve into better specimens of men at some time, somehow, over time. She was kind of like a den mother for wolves. We rented half of a slightly rundown yellow clapboard house just south of the center of town, which quickly became notorious for high volume socializing long into the night. So much so that it was not unusual for us to open the door after midnight to distinguished uninvited guests with blue uniforms. We partied just about every night at the Yellow House, but we liked to branch out. So we were excited when we found out that an after-hours club had just opened south of the Ogunquit line in the town of York to take advantage of that town's more lenient ordinances about how late you could serve alcohol. And in a gesture to their northern neighbor, the club called themselves Good Night, Ogunquit. So we decided that we wanted to check the place out. We heard it was always busy with lots of young people like ourselves, so much so that there were off-duty cops hired to do crowd control. Now, we had a cordially conflictive relationship with the Ogunquit Police Department, but these would have been York cops. We didn't know them at all. So on the night that we decided to check it out, we went down to Bobby's apartment above Einstein's restaurant and pre-functioned a little bit. And then we walked south towards Goodnight Ogunquit. It was only about a mile, and that way we wouldn't have to worry about cars. We were all dressed in our summer clubbing best. I was wearing a button-down red and white Oxford shirt and my running shorts and my white tennis shoes that leaked beach sand wherever I went. And I had stopped cutting my hair. I was trying to grow a mustache, and I only scraped a razor across my chin maybe once a week. I looked kind of like a preppy gone bad. Anyway, we got to Goodnight Ogunquit and we went up the steep driveway to where it levels out into the parking lot. And as we crested that rise, Norman Walker spotted one of the cops on duty and started verbally abusing him in a very intelligent way, like, rent a cop, where'd you get that badge? Out of a cereal box? And I just kind of tried to make myself invisible. The cop grumbled and growled a little bit, but let us go by. And so we joined the crowd that was outside the door. And there was a kid on a stool next to the door, carding people before they went in. And every time somebody, a group went in, the door would open and the disco lights would flash and the music would blare out, heightening our sense of anticipation. Eventually, we got closer to the door. Eventually, we were at the front of the line. Norm and Bobby got carded. They went in, the door opened, the lights flashed, the music blared. And then Walker and Alvarez got carded and went in. And then it was my turn. Now, I was 21, but I guess I had left my ID back at the Yellow House. The kid at the door says, "Sorry, man, if you don't have an ID, I can't let you in." I said I understood and I turned to go. And then the cop that Walker and Norm had words with came running up and said, "Yeah, if you don't have an ID, get the hell out of here." So I called him the name of a puckered hidden body part and brushed by him. And the next thing I knew, there was a meaty hand on my shoulder and he spun me around and started pushing me backward down the hill. And a grenade of rage went off in my head. How dare he touch me? And as if unbidden, not knowing that I was responsible for it, I saw my fist hitting him in the chin. And then I clearly remember my next thought, oh my God, what have I done? I'm gonna die. So I ducked down and grabbed him under the waist, under his flailing arms, and threw him up against a car, just to kind of cover up. I was making this up as I went along, and it wasn't going in a very good direction. So the other cop who was on duty ran up, grabbed me by the hair and the seat of the pants, bounced me over the gravel and threw me in the cruiser. And I was taken to the York Police Department, and a couple hours later, Bobby, the patient den mother, came and bailed me out with a borrowed stack of her boss, Steve Einstein's money. And I went to trial a few months later. I was convicted of simple assault, sentenced to 30 days in jail with all but 3 suspended. And the craziest thing about it is I said, but Your Honor, I have a plane ticket to France. Can I do my time after I get back? And he let me. So I've told this story a lot over the years. Immediately after, I told it a lot, mostly to young white guys like myself with undeveloped frontal lobes to show what a badass I was. But eventually, I stopped telling it. Maybe I grew up a little. Maybe I just had other stories I wanted to tell. But the years rolled on, and another August rolled around. And I found myself on the World Fellowship lawn in a circle with about 100 other people. Our hands were joined in memory of Mike Brown, the young unarmed Black man who had been shot dead by police the day before in Ferguson, Missouri, for expressing his rage at a white police officer. So that day I told the story again, but it had changed. It became the story of an unbelievably lucky white kid, of a white kid who was mind-bogglingly clueless about his own privilege, and who, through no virtue of his own, fate and circumstance allowed to outgrow his youthful expressions of rage and grow up and find love and have a daughter and watch her grow up too. Blind fate and random circumstance.
Thank you. Thank you, Andy. So I'm going to read a piece that I wrote. I'm heard well. Folks can hear me well. So I'm going to read a piece that I wrote called "The Policeman Thinks He's God." Short story. I was on the bus and I was bearing witness. The policeman thinks he's God. Older Black man, dark copper complexion, hops on the Silver Line bus in downtown Boston heading towards Dudley. He has on a navy blue hat with a red B on the front and the word Boston stitched in red and white on the back. The hat covers what appears to be a Scottie Pippen-like baby afro. He's clean shaven with a scar on his left cheek and missing a few of his top middle teeth. There's nothing memorable about his black long sleeve shirt, but I noticed his jeans were deeply faded as if they had seen their better days years ago. He's wearing all of that with some worn out black dress shoes and some black dress socks while carrying a big black trash bag with who knows what in it. He's talking to himself loudly. His speech is slurred, and he's walking with a slight limp. It's hard to tell if he's inebriated, having a rough time in the moment, mentally challenged, or all of the above. His words vacillate from fully incoherent to waxing poetic. The policeman thinks he's God, but he doesn't make the sunshine, does he? He doesn't make the wind blow either. I know that's right. He walks to the back of the bus and he takes a seat next to two young men in their "I just got off of a long day at work" clothes, who are really not happy about the fact that he's choosing to sit next to them. He goes in and out of unintelligible speech, sometimes in whisper, sometimes at the top of his lungs, till finally, one of the young men asks him his name in a rough tone. "My name's Leon." "Well, Leon, I'm gonna need you to shut up. Sorry, 1 second, y'all. I'm here with my children. Speaking of my children. All right. He walks to the back of the, I'm gonna bring it back, y'all. He walks to the back of the bus and he takes a seat next to two young men in there. I just got off work clothes who are really not happy about the fact that he chose to sit next to them. He goes in and out of unintelligible speech. Sometimes it's in a whisper and sometimes it's at the top of his lungs till finally one of the young men asks him his name in a rough tone. My name's Leon. Well, Leon, I'm gonna need you to shut up. He responds to both of them quickly. I'm just trying to kick it. Man, I don't care what you're trying to do. Just shut up or I'll make you shut up. Leon gets up from his seat, walks away, as if speaking to everyone and no one in particular. He says, I'm moving. I was just trying to kick it. I don't want any problems. Then he looks back at the young men and he says, I'm going to tell God on y'all. I'm going to tell God. You'll see. I'm going to tell God. He finds another seat next to a woman who quickly hops out of her seat and relocates. Then he leans over and starts a one-sided conversation with the man sitting directly across from him. He's still talking to himself, but he's looking right at him. Hey, man, you ever been frustrated? Do you like mac and cheese? I'm frustrated. The policeman told me to keep it moving. They think they're God, but they're not God. I like Kraft macaroni and cheese. The Silver Line gets it to the Lenox Street Projects bus stop. Leon and his trash bag hop off. Thank you.
Thank you, Eroc. So this story I'd like to tell you is a story that's been with me since the mid 80s. And it came back to me recently because I was looking for a story to meet a particular theme for Stories from the Stage, the WGBH show. And I ended up crafting it into a more performable piece and recording it. And well, I'll tell you what happened after I recorded it, after I tell this story. My brother and I are standing on the side of a dusty path in the heart of West Africa, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. We're holding up our bicycles by the handlebar because we're completely befuddled as to which way to go. We look back and forth. And it occurs to me that it's not unusual for me to get myself into a bind by improvising, but my brother usually has a clearly thought out plan to start with. Did I mention that me and my brother are identical twins? When people hear that, they often ask, identical? How identical are you? And the answer is, in all the ways that are obvious and superficial, pretty darn identical. But my brother is the type A twin. When we were babies, I was content to crawl along on my belly indefinitely, but my brother came up with a clear, detailed workout plan so he could learn to walk as quickly as possible. When we lived together as kids, he was the one who folded his underwear while I just dumped my clothes out on the floor so I could find things more easily. My wife, Andrea, will attest that that's still my clothing management plan. When we ran our first marathon together, my brother came in under our goal time while I undertrained and brought up the rear. My brother has enough advanced degrees for the both of us. But when it comes to our views of the world, to what we hold sacred and our hopes for the planet, we're gloriously identical. And we've always looked for opportunities in our adult life to come together and have experiences that would be part of our common culture in the future. So that's how I happened to be visiting him at the tail end of his time in the Peace Corps in Burkina Faso. And of all that trip, all the time we spent together, that one magical afternoon stands out in our common memory. After he got done his day's work at the high school in Kudugu, we hopped on bicycles and pedaled north out of town, past the big Catholic church, past herds of sheep and goats who were nibbling the grass that had popped up since the first rains a few days before. And a couple of kilometers out of town, we turned right between two spreading baobab trees. And we continued to zigzag our way across the savanna grasslands, between mud-walled family compounds, past farmers in conical hats who were working the soil with broad hoes, getting ready for planting in the next few days. That afternoon took on the timelessness of childhood. But it was the timelessness of childhood with the additional factor of alcoholic beverages, because every hamlet we passed through, somebody would wave us in under a thatched roof and offer us calabashes of dolo, homemade millet beer. And after several such visits, we saw the sun getting close to the horizon, and the timelessness evaporated. And we realized that with all those calabashes of liquid hospitality and all the zigs and zags we had taken on our bicycles, we had absolutely no idea how to get back to my brother's house. Now, my brother spoke Moray, the local language, but he worked mostly in French, and he realized that he was going to need pretty complicated directions to get us home. So at the edge of the next village, we stopped and asked for a French speaker. And we were led to the house of the chef du village, sort of a mayor. And we were invited in and sat down in around a long, low table, and they offered us tea. We were relieved it wasn't millet beer. And then as we sipped, the man who had led us there and the chef du village asked us about where we were from. The United States, is it a neighboring country to France? It's important that you understand that these were men who had built their own homes, who grew almost all their own food under the most challenging circumstances and raised their own livestock. They lived in a complex cosmology that connected them to the ancestors and those around them and the generations to come. They just didn't know international geography. It also bears pointing out that my brother and I were the ones who were lost. They knew exactly where they were. But my brother crouched down in front of the low table and began moving the metal teapot and the glass teacups to give a sense of scale. He said, "Here we are, and if you cross the Sahel and cross the Sahara, you will eventually reach the shore of the Mediterranean." And here he gestured beyond the table toward the far wall. If you travel across the Mediterranean, you'll get to France. And then if you hang a left and travel twice as far as you've already traveled, you get to where we live in the United States. The two men smiled in some confusion and shook their heads. And then the chef du village said, so softly it was difficult to hear, "Que Dieu est grand." God is great. A few days later, we did get back to my brother's house that evening. And a few days later, I traveled home to the US by the route that my brother had described. But across the long years since then, that simple expression of that Burkinabe mayor has stuck with us. Que Dieu est grand. God is great. No matter how many times we've heard similar words spoken with dangerous certainty from the mouths of fundamentalists of all stripes, even in our most agnostic moments, that simple, humble expression of awe at the grandeur of creation seems to us like a talisman against human arrogance. And when my brother and I get together now in the summer on top of a mountain or in a canoe at dawn, watching the first rays of sunlight cut through the mist, one of us is bound to look across at the other and whisper, Que Dieu est grand. And our smiles are identical. So that's a story that's been with me a long time. On February 14th, I recorded it in the WGBH studios, and on my way home, I stopped to visit a friend in Hampton, New Hampshire, who was dying of cancer. And we had a short visit. He was the head of the New Hampshire Democrats in the State House, Rennie Cushing. And so we talked about different political matters. And then he looked like he was starting to drift off. So I asked if he'd like to hear the story that I had just recorded that day. And he did. I told it and he listened. And then after I was done, he said thoughtfully, Que Dieu est grand. And then he drifted off. And 3 weeks after that, my wife Andrea and daughter Fiona and I were to go see Rennie for what we figured would be our last visit. And we heard that morning that as we were getting ready to get in the car, that he had died. And so we went to the wake the next day. And it wasn't until after the wake that I realized that Que Dieu est grand had been Rennie's last words to me. So that's the case of a story that I tell in honor of my brother and in honor of the simple wisdom of that Burkinabe man. But now whenever I tell it, I can't help it. You know, it connects me to Rennie and his memory also. So back to you, Eroc.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's still a little while sometimes with Zoom. So in my mind, Andy, I heard this. I saw a little bit of this, maybe some of this, and just thank you for sharing. I'm here actually with my eldest, 13 here, just, and my two youngest are playing in the next room. One of the things at 41 years old that I've been able to do is get in a lot of healing. You know, shout out to my therapist, shout out to my men's group, shout out to books, shout out to World Fellowship Center weekends and getaways, and shout out to the movement work that keeps the heart going and keeps us moving. And a lot of it, I think there's this quote. You know, sometimes I get these divine poets mixed up. So it's either Rumi or Hafiz, my people. But the idea was I was a fool, so I tried to change the world. And I became wise, so I began to change myself. And so really thinking about often so much of movement work is external. And a lot of times we kind of refuse to see what our impact is, what we've taken in, what's the poison that we've taken in from imperialism and capitalism and patriarchy and white supremacy. What are the things that we have inhaled, and how do we release it? And for me, I'm someone who, you know what? I'm gonna let the poem speak for itself. I'm gonna let it come from there. Birds in the background. Let's go, birds. You can laugh with me. Can you fly with me? Are you afraid of my tears, or could you cry with me? Do you stash your grief like a thief in the night, or are you willing to try to be free in this life? If there's a hole in your heart, please remember, you don't need to know you're whole to surrender, because things fall apart and they come back together. Then they fall apart again, and that goes on forever. And though all things end, that's not a contradiction. Trust me, friends, that's a benediction, because the morning after morning, the sun still rises. The world keeps turning and medicine crystallizes. See, I was first a victim, then I victimized. See, I experienced trauma, and then I traumatized. I strive to change that view in my daughter's eyes by showing her through my actions that her father tries. And I'm not afraid to apologize. And far from hollow lies, I had to learn that my sorrow's wise, that there's wisdom in the tears I cry. They show me how to change my mind and show me how to love inside. They took my heart and opened wide and pulled me to the other side. They told me honor Mother Earth and showed me what my karma's worth. Madrecita rewired me, rewarded me for loving me, conspired to make me whole, medicine for the soul, always return home. They say hurt people hurt people. Well, I did. And I can't change what I did, but I can change how I live. Learn it's an honor to receive, and it's a blessing to give. Learn I could walk through the abyss, and I could walk through the mist. I had to put down my fist and do the hard work. I mean, that real heavy lifting, that in your heart work, that powerful transformation, that pray to the God's work, that keep on growing even when it hurts work. I planted seeds in the garden, and I got my hands dirty. I learned to soften, not harden. And man, I feel worthy. Healed the child inside so he could stop harming. Learned that love was much more than a Prince Charming. Deeply rooted, I stayed low and I kept humble. I learned to shine bright, full flow in the jungle. Learned that a sorry is as good as a behavior change. And love can manifest, and we can learn to break the chains. See, it's our turn to break the chains, man. We got to break these chains. This for those who break patterns that turn bad terms into lanterns. Become one with our heartbeats, explore galaxies inside of the star fleets and reverse tragedies. Imagination, creating new ways beyond their ways. Internal prisons got us wishing we could free ourselves from ourselves. We think we're living in hell, but self-introspection is a wondrous well. I've seen healing and honor the feeling. I'll see more. There's no ceiling on this healing, and I know what my heart is for. So I soar through exploration, beautiful eye of celebration, no delusion or imitation, confusion or impatience. With an unlimited supply of love, I work to repair the love with those I love. Rituals and circles with my heart wide open. Praying the ancestors protect me from that poison. See, I'd rather fly high than lie frozen. I watch others posing, pretending. I'd rather be heart mending. Sending up prayers and preparing for life's lessons, receiving with a smile life's blessings, knowing that I'm worth it. So if I'm feeling blessed, I deserved it. See, I paid with this pain, so this happiness, I earned it. Thank you.
Thank you, Eroc. I love that.
I wrote that one under the Catskills on day 2 of an ayahuasca journey. So thank you for receiving it. It was a download.
Before I open it up, I'll the other day I noticed on your Facebook page, Eroc, you posted a memory from 2017 that seems relevant here. It says, 1, it is okay to reinvent yourself. 2, it is okay to move past that old role that you've become accustomed to playing. 3, it is okay to rewrite the script. 4, it is okay to outgrow the person you are right now.
Yes.
5, it is okay to evolve. It is okay to evolve. It is okay to evolve. It is imperative that we evolve. Wash, rinse, and repeat. Oh, there's another R word, reword. So I would love to open this up, unless Eroc has anything else to say before it. And I would love to hear people's thoughts about the way the stories we tell ourselves change and how that affects us and them. And also mix it up with the way our country's stories about itself change, and how you know, anything people want to say about the tyranny of the one story, and the necessity, the radicalizing democracy of allowing in all the stories. So I'll just open it up, and I think Dean's gonna help us with the wild, exciting cacophony of many voices.
Wild, exciting cacophony of many voices. That's beautiful. And I would like to invite anybody who wants to contribute or ask a question to chime in now. Andy, quick question. What year were you in Ogunquit?
So I worked there for 3 summers, 81 to 83.
Oh, I just missed you. I was in a band. We played at the Cape Nettic Lobster Pound, which is halfway between Ogunquit and York.
Oh, sure.
Spent the summer of 78 there.
Oh, wow.
And had a near brush with the law as well. It had to do with alcohol and driving. Fortunately, it was a nice guy and he let me go. It was like 1 a.m. and I was on my way home from this gig. So I guess I just barely missed you. It would have been fun. I would tell everybody that I met Andy for the first time a few years later. I was playing at the Folkway and Andy was washing dishes there in the second incarnation. That was in Peterborough, New Hampshire. And then of course, later on at the World Fellowship Center, where I am proud to say that I think I had something to do with him and Andrea getting hired there. I saw them come in. I was doing a show there. I saw them come in, and I had met them around Guatemala activism stuff, and I immediately I was on my way out the door. I immediately emailed Kit and Christoph, and I said, "You have to take a very close look at these two. These are remarkable people, worth your serious consideration for that position." And they got the position, and we were so happy about that. And 20 years have gone by. So that's what I want to say to Andy. Eroc, what I want to say to you is that you live in Hyde Park, and I want you someday this summer to bring your 3 to visit my community garden plot, which is Cummins Highway. And
yep, I know it in Rosendale. Yep.
Yeah. Someday I'd love to have a picnic with you right next to all my tomatoes, and maybe later in the summer when there's harvest. I just put everything in. It's a beautiful place for kids, and so if we can, I hope we can make that happen.
I deeply appreciate you, Dean. I made it so I was 11 years old in 1992 when I first set foot on this Ogunquit, York Wells area. And it was my family trying to find somewhere where we could go vacation as a family camping in Wells, because we could, we was 7 of us, and we'd get in the car and drive 2 hours. And I remember just falling in love with this place. So it's one of my favorite places on earth. It's where I asked Javi's mother to marry me. And so I just thought it was funny you brought it up. And some of the best lobster bisque you're ever going to have for those folks who enjoy seafood. But yeah, and beautiful scenes, just gorgeous place. So
We'll have to cross.
That's my old Gunquick connection. We were there, Dean in the 70s, Andy in the 80s. I was there in the 90s. There we go. And here we are in the 2020s.
Yeah.
Oh man. One of the things I'll add about story, I get to do a lot of work at the Highlander Center through UFI. And my first time there in Tennessee was at 16, and I'd go back and facilitate. And one of the people there, Susan Williams, elder, good people's good organizer, educator. And we had a moment to talk, and we were sitting out there talking, and I enjoy stories. And so I asked her, what do you feel like? What do you think about in regards to stories and stuff? And I'm paraphrasing, but it sat with me. It was Eroc, all we have is our ability to live story, hear story, and share stories, and to hear other people's stories, and to let people, and that kind of like sense of life for me. So when I think of story, I actually think that's one of the that rides with me, that resonates with me. Hearing people's stories, sharing people's stories, changing our stories, being a part of a story, continuing stories, legacies, traditions, sharing stories as simple as picking up a child's book and reading it to the children, but just the power of our stories. And I think it's pretty cool that even that kind of convergence, that divine coincidence, that 1 decade each of us were in this space in New England and Maine, and that we all have our own stories around what we experience there and how we see it and perceive it. So just that little, even that minor convergence.
Thank you.
Hey, I want to show you all something. This was an event we did to benefit the Highlander Center.
What a beautiful pizza. What a beautiful.
That was in 2019. That was right after that horrific fire
attack
that happened. And we had a 100th Pete Seeger birthday party celebration. We raised about $3,500 for the Highlander Center. That was a beautiful moment. I've never been there. I'd love to.
Have to try and
go there sometime soon.
We're gonna have to be in touch because we have a training there in October. Yeah. Shout it out. Some stories, y'all. Andy, Eroc, Community Church of Boston. Any thoughts, questions, formulating? We
have some poets and storytellers. One last question for Eroc. Have you published any poetry books of any kind?
No, so I have not. I am absolutely working on a book right now that includes poetry and story. It's called We Came, We Saw, We Conjured. And it's about healing, dispatches, stories, healing through the movement. And so there'll be some poetry and some tinctures and rest and all that kind of stuff. And it's going to be a passion project. Hopefully I'll be able to come back through here when it's finished and we'll talk about that some more. But yeah, definitely like fancy myself a writer. I love writing. I enjoy reading. Those are two of my favorite things to do. And then now as I'm older with children, it's mostly listening to the stories and to the podcast and that kind of stuff. So thanks for asking. I definitely it's a lifelong dream. When we were elementary school kids and they would ask me what I wanted to be, I would say author. And the baseball player for the Red Sox. And since I already retired from 10 seasons with the Red Sox, I'm ready to finish. I'm ready in my imagination, a little Eddie Kendrick's Temptations is just my imagination running away with me. But I think I can make the second goal. I think I can make the author work. I think that I might be able to share in that.
Yeah, I'll testify to that big time. And I just know that we will have your book proudly in our huge poetry library, which we inherited from Bob Datilio. It's massive, and we're just cataloging it, and it will be an important part of our our collection here in the auditorium, or else up in the library, which will be on the 3rd floor, we hope. So so make that happen. The sooner the better, say I.
We'll see what we can do. I'm with it.
Dorothy, how are you, Dorothy? Let me see if I can figure out. Oh, there
Okay.
you are. Let me.
It was very
spotlight
good
you
to-
right there.
Very good
There
to
you
hear the
are.
stories. Thank
Ah.
you both. And I guess the comment you hear, well, I'm in the dark a bit, but in the kitchen here. I've been thinking about what I might mention, and I've thought about gatherings that people have after someone passes, someone dies, and how telling stories about them seems to be something that offspring like to share stories if you get together. And I don't really know if what happens at Shivas in any depth. I haven't been to very many, but do people tend to tell stories? And do you want to tell stories that are funny? Do you want to tell, I mean, thinking about people and their stories, I am going to go to a service in June, and there are some stories that have come to mind. So I wonder what you guys think about stories in relation to grieving or remembering people, individuals.
Yeah, I'm gonna go first and then pass it to Andy, who I think is maybe this is mind timing. I absolutely love the art of sharing story when we are grieving individuals that are transitioning, that have transitioned, that are becoming our ancestors, keeping them alive in story. I can remember, but the first thing that comes to mind to me is the ways in which we cope. And I remember when my grandfather, my abuelo William, passed away. The man was hilarious. So we were at a funeral laughing so hard, sharing stories, funny story. And anybody who kind of didn't know what was happening would have been like, what is happening here? But we were grieving by sharing these funny stories. And people were in between laughter, wiping a tear or crying or having a hug, and just the power of the emotions. And I would say, hearing a lot of stories, in particular with my work with mothers whose children have been murdered, hearing a lot of stories of people whose lives were taken young, and then kind of like, frozen in the moment, frozen in the time in the story, keeping that story and reminiscing. I learned through all of that we as human beings have the ability to feel the most profound joy and the deepest sorrow at the same time. And I think in those moments, sometimes when we're reflecting on people, especially if it's a joyful reflection, we're not, reminiscing on like Pinochet, but like if we're telling stories around our loved ones, people we care about, and even if they're complicated, even if we are all so complicated, even when they are complicated human beings, and we reflect back on some of those complexities, we can add more empathy, we can add more care, we can heal from it. There's just so much power in the story of sharing that. That's one of my favorite times to share story, is around people that we care about, loved ones, and hearing people's memory, perspective, side, maybe a reflection you hadn't heard. And I think I'll end with, I think I saw that on a large international scale for me personally when Prince passed away. And there was all this kind of mystique to it, but then there was all these people coming out of anywhere from stories of all these things that he had been doing kind of in the shadows. Like, oh, he funded this, he paid for that, he did. And you started to see all these people being like, oh, and connecting versus the story. So I think that's also a powerful way to connect. So Andy, I'll pass it over.
Yeah, I also love it when we come together to, as Eroc said, keep people alive through stories. One of my kind of pet peeves is when, because of who takes control of memorial celebration or the way it's framed or organized, we don't get a complete picture. Like I love it when people are portrayed in all their complexity as we remember them, and not just this airbrushed two-dimensional thing. I'll also tell you, like, there's so many times, like Eroc said, I think I know somebody, and then I show up at the memorial service and I hear the stories and I see another side of them that I didn't know about. There was this guy in my Unitarian church who died several years ago, and he was a volunteer at the local K-8 school, and he substitute taught a lot and so forth. And another of my friends who also works at the school heard two kids talking about Mr. Clemens who had died, and one of the kids said to the other, "Oh, the funeral for Mr. Clemens is this Saturday at the Unitarian Church. You should come." And the other kid said, "Well, I didn't know Mr. Clemens." And the other kid said, "Oh, you should come anyway. Get to know him." So yeah, Dorothy. First of all, it's great to see you, and second of all, yeah, I think that's the most important part of the celebration. The other thing I would say is I love it when more and more, people have the good sense to include a community sharing time rather than just the one or two eulogies. And I think that's so special and so important. I love the ones that go on and on and on, and everybody who has a smidgen of an anecdote gets to share it.
I think about Chuck Turner's celebration of life, Presente. It was 3.5 hours, and it was worth every minute. And just the thought of the stories and the timelines and the sharing and all the things I learned that I didn't know from the 70s Chuck and the 80s Chuck and the Chuck that I didn't know. And, Chuck Turner Presente. But yeah, the power of listening to stories and getting a fuller understanding of somebody that you already know and now get to know just a little bit more and maybe feel a little bit more connected to the other folks as you listen. So like, oh, you had a special, you had, this is a genuine, you had your thing, you had that. That's so beautiful. So thank you, Dorothy. That's just even the thought of it makes
Thank you.
It's interesting.
Kay Klein wants to say something about Shivas.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to respond to Dorothy asking about at a Shiva. Some people, it depends on how formally religious the family is. And very often, some Shivas, they invite a rabbi. They have a bit of a service. They may have prayer books. I've walked into a Shiva sometime not realizing they were going to do that. And the whole group there has got their prayer books and they're praying and so on. So you have to be guided. It depends if the family is doing maybe just a short prayer and then people are sharing, that's great. If you walk in and they've got a rabbi there and they're doing some kind of a service, wait till afterward and be guided by the family. If they're going to start talking about the person who has passed, it can be so varied. I don't think there's any single way to deal with how should you tell stories at a Shiva. Get the feel of the place. Get the amount of, not sorrowing, the amount of formal doing something before you start telling a story. And then when you have a sense of it and you have wonderful stories, of course, share them. And thank you to the speaker this morning. It was really, I've been gardening, so I've been listening through the window while we deal with putting in plants outdoors at the Cape. Thank you.
What a beautiful way to listen. Thank you.
It was.
Thank you for sharing us with your gardening.
Dan the Bagel Man, you're next.
Okay. Yeah, I'm here. I'm in the midst of making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches as I do every Sunday for the homeless.
Can we see your face?
Yeah, hold on. Okay. So, Eroc, I've known you for many years, and listening to your music inspired me, and I'm sure many more, with the group foundation, which was not talked about today, but that's okay. Everybody has different facets of who they are, which make up who you are. And you come through in many ways. And your stories, it made me think of an incident. I had a cop. I've been arrested many times for good things and stupid things. In my younger days, I was a little bit stupid. But as an older, you learn. And one time, me and my friend of mine, Marcus Niche, who's an artist. Some people here might know Marcus. He's an old time artist in Boston, Cambridge, lives in Cambridge. I decided the Boston Marathon was happening. This is years ago, before the bombing. And they put up a temporary piece of wood doing some work in front of the library on, let's see, Dartmouth Street. And I said, wow, everybody's going to see that piece of wood. Thousands of people on TV were walking by during the marathon. Why not do something with that wood? So I got my friend Marcus and we went there. We spray painted, I don't know how we did it. We got Leonard Peltier, free Leonard Peltier now. Mami Abdul Jamal, free him also. And we did something about one other thing about Palestine or Native American Indian. I forget what the other message was. Marcus might know better than me. My memory is terrible. And as soon as we got that put up, somebody somehow told the MBTA folks downstairs they were defacing property. So the MBTA had nothing to do with it, but he, inspector, called the police. And even though it's not MBTA, it's the Boston Police. It's the Boston Police. I mean, they came, and as soon as they saw what we wrote, they saw us, they said, sorry, guys, we have to arrest you. They had to handcuff us. And they, I think, did they handcuff us? I'm not so sure about that. That's nothing my memory is as I get older. But they totally like it. They saw my button about marijuana legalization. The cops said I was in Vietnam. I mean, I know about Vietnam. I agree. And the cops totally liked what we had to say. They stopped and got pizza on their way in. They didn't rush to put us in jail. They realized that, if they'd seen that, they would never arrest us, they said, because they agreed with what we were putting the message out there. And then once it was called in, they had to follow through with it. So me and Marcus both got arrested for a temporary sign that was temporary. It wasn't going to be torn down. It was just there. And luckily, it stayed up during the marathon, from what I understand. So people did see our message. And luckily, we both got court-appointed lawyers. And one was just in the United States, recently became a lawyer. He was a lawyer somewhere else. And we had great lawyers, and everything was dropped on us. But not all cops are totally bad. Although I've had some bad cop incidents as older in life with other bad cops in Boston who did not like my politics. And once I got threatened by a cop for setting up illegally on the common during an event.
Thank you.
But it was interesting that the cops liked what we had to say, and we got away with the sign. But anyways, great storytelling for both of you. I wish I was a good storyteller. I have to work on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan.
That was great. Thank you, Dan. I want to tail on to the theme by letting everybody know that Carolyn Poinelli Presente will be remembered on July 10th. That's a Sunday at 1 p.m. here at Community Church. Carolyn got hit by a car in late February and succumbed to her injuries a couple weeks later. Carolyn was a long time associated with the church and was present at the church a whole lot, but didn't become a member till the very end. She was here especially a lot during COVID. She had a marginal living situation and spent a lot of time in libraries. Libraries were closed, and she was here. We set up a computer for her to work and browse and rest. And she will be remembered, a very unique individual, just as we are wont to harbor and entertain and love at this place. Carolyn Poinelli Presente, July 10th is when we will remember Carolyn. She has 3 siblings who will be here, a sister in Connecticut, 2 brothers right here in Boston. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of stories to tell. We have, no, that's Dan. He already spoke, so I saw his hand. And anyway, I want to tell you just that usually we put up this basket. You see the basket? And tell you that we depend on your largesse and your generosity to keep this place going. And the chat has 2 ways that you can help us. You can go on our website and do a credit card or a PayPal. You can also go on your checkbook and send us a check, and the address is right there if you don't know it already. Let me just recap by reminding you that Wednesday night we have a special event here. Reverend Dr. Ignacio Castuera from California is visiting here and will give us a talk about life after death. If that's a subject that interests you, or if you know Dr. Castuera, he's a wonderful, incredibly intelligent and learned man that we've had on our pulpit a number of times, and he just happens to be in town and wants to meet with us. Come Wednesday night, 7 p.m. We might try and broadcast it. I haven't figured that one out yet, but seeing as we broadcast everything, I want to tell you something else on the subject of broadcasting, which is that we will be joined by a new regular presence at Community Church. His name is Amar Ahmad. Amar Ahmad is presently a full-time employee of Mass Peace Action, and he is a brilliant blogger and Zoomer and interviewer, and he is going to help us with just some broadcast issues around Zoom and YouTube and social networks. And he's just a terrific guy. You might remember that he conducted the interview with the father and brother of Julian Assange when we awarded Julian the Sacco Vanzetti Award last June. And he's not only good with the technical stuff, which is what we're hiring him, it's just a couple hours a week, but he's also a really brilliant young political thinker, and it'll be really wonderful to have Amar on board in the upcoming weeks and into the next season. Amar Ahmad. You can find some more of his interviews and blogs on the Mass Peace Action MAPA website and Facebook page. Is there anybody else that wants to say hello to either of these wonderful presenters today? Because if not, we are almost ready to say thank you to both of them and say have a wonderful week, and look for our new newsletter. Where's a copy of it? I want to show you.
Dean, I would finish with a poem, and if Eroc has something short also, I have a poem that might be an appropriate sort of.
That sounds great. You have the spotlight, Andy, and then Eroc. Fabulous. Thank you.
Okay, this is a poem by our friend Michael Henson, who's a World Fellowship person. He's a proudly Appalachian man who lives in Cincinnati, old-timey musician, poet, novelist, who we're gonna get to see in a few weeks when we go through that way. Anyway, I love this poem. It's from his collection, Crow Call, and it goes something like this. I have been so often mute when I wanted most to have you hear me. But I have studied speech with the mole and the crow and the unsilent dead who speak to us daily with their mouths of clay and their tongues of grass as they drill us in the old and necessary lessons. And what do they teach? I have no trick for telling you all of what I think they say, but I believe that it comes to this. There is no law but that of love. That takes courage, and we often fail. Because we fail, forgiveness is basic as bread. We fail there too, and so the world is sad. If I could have the voice I wanted once, I would be your bard. I would bind you to me with firelight tales of struggle and discovery to drive back your darkness for a while. But I have only this small voice with which my father voiced me, a voice with the reed and the rasp of the crow, and I fear it is much too small. Even so, I tell you, there is no law but the law of love. Take courage. Take courage.
Word. Let's see. I'll spit the last thing that I wrote, and it's very short. Got on my knees and I prayed for forgiveness. Burn Palo Santo, ancestors bear witness. Spiritual fitness, a demon slayer. Down on my knees in prayer, head to the altar. Great spirits catch me when I falter. It is here that I slaughter my imposters. This is a prayer for my mother and my father. Being your child has been a blessing and an honor. Grew up in a home with lots of love and lots of trauma. So I had to kneel, work to heal and to prosper. I came, I saw, and then I conjured. And I refuse to fall for their divide and conquer. Hear the call, free them all. Together we're stronger. United we can defeat state-sponsored horrors. Won't forget what they did to Eric Garner, Dante Wright, Trayvon, or Breonna. These monsters, they kicked in her door and then they shot her. Rest in peace to police state martyrs. Down on my knees, I let the tears flow harder. Pray we do the work to take the revolution farther. Uprise my people in the tradition of Asada.
Ooh.
Well, thank you both, Eroc Arroyo and Andy Davis. We're going to take this out with a little tune that I'm just obsessed with right now. And it's written by Gene Rowe, R-O-H-E. And I swear that someday this will be sung at baseball games instead of what's sung now.
Dean, you know she's also a World Fellowship performer, right?
No, I didn't know that. Now I do.
Yeah, she's a regular. Yeah. And she's also performed right here in Tamworth. She's totally awesome. And you're absolutely right about the song that I think you're about to play.
And
yeah.
I toured with her in 73.
Too bad we couldn't all be together to sing this song and hear each other. Doesn't work too well to sing together on Zoom, but you can sing it from home as soon as you learn the words to this new national anthem. Atlantic and Pacific flow, the Great Lakes and the Gulf of Mexico. The land between sustains us all. To cherish it our tireless call. Arise, arise, I see the future in your eyes. To a more perfect union we aspire and lift our voices from the fire. We reached these shores from many lands. We came with hungry hearts and hands. Some came by force and some by will. At the auction block or the darkened mill. Arise, arise, I see the future in your eyes. To a more perfect union we aspire and lift our voices from the fire. We died in your fields and your factories, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees, with an old coat hanger in a room somewhere, a trail of tears, an electric chair. Arise, arise, I see the future in your eyes. To a more perfect union we aspire and lift our voices from the fire. And our great responsibility to be guardians of our liberty, till tyrants bow to the people's dream and justice flows like a mighty stream. Everybody, arise, arise, I see the future in your eyes. To a more perfect union we aspire and lift our voices from the fire. Love you, folks. Thank you, Eroc. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Andy. Love you.
It's
Thank
been
you.
just a wonderful morning. And you can watch it on your YouTube, and you can send your friends there to hear these stories again. Greetings to your 3 kids, Eroc, and we'll be in touch about a picnic at the community garden, okay?
Looking forward.
Uh,
Peace. Be well.
So, all right. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Okay, bye, Dean. Bye, Eroc. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.